So I'm going to call the meeting to order, and I'm going to read my little statement here. The Commission on Equitable Housing and Development meeting has now commenced. I guess it's actually the Housing Desegregation Subcommittee meeting that has now commenced. It is March 23rd, 2023. This meeting is being held virtually due to COVID-19 to allow for social distancing and protect the public health. As we continue our efforts in meeting remotely, we ask all commissioners and guests to mute yourselves until called upon to speak to avoid feedback and background noise. For those who have dialed in using the call-in number, to unmute to speak, dial *6 on your phone. Also, prior to speaking, please announce who you are to identify yourself. As a reminder, this meeting is being recorded. We ask that you only use the chat function to request to speak or to announce that you are leaving the meeting so that we can track quorum. Also, in order to comply with the state open meeting law, attendance and votes will be done by way of roll call using audio, not by using the chat function. And with that, I will do the roll call. Mike Edmonds.
I am present.
Vicky Cusino.
Present.
Lori Mazurbo.
Present.
Jay Young, present. All right, we have quorum and we are good to go. I see, welcome Larice and company. Thanks for joining us today. And I think maybe since y'all are here, we should potentially change the agenda a little bit and go ahead and put move number 3 up to number 2. So with that, Larice, I will welcome y'all to the meeting, and we're really happy that you're here today. And I think what we were wanting to do is, since we are in this subcommittee in particular, talking a lot about equity, gentrification, and displacement, you know, we've talked a lot about how the city of Tucson is measuring equity and kind of how that plays into moving forward and recommending policies and the work of the commission as a whole as we mature as a commission. So with that, I will turn it over to y'all and see what y'all are up to and how we might be able to work together. So again, welcome, and I'll turn it over to y'all.
Great. Good afternoon. Thank you. So I just apologize in advance. I have to hop off in probably about 10-15 minutes. But yes, I just wanted to join. Thank you guys for the invitation to be a part of this conversation. My name is Larice Walker. I use she, her pronouns. I've been in my role here at the city as the Chief Equity Officer for a year now. Officially, March was a year for me, and I've been loving it. I can say that the city has definitely been committed to the work, and they've been setting forth a clear path for the Office of Equity to do what we need to do to ensure that our policies, our programs, and our practices are truly equitable and accessible for the community that we're serving. So my colleague Laura Sharp is on the call, so I'll let her hop on off mic, off mute to introduce herself. And then I think, do we have a presentation, Laura? A brief one to share? No? That's okay. Then we could just talk about some of the things that we're working on, but I'll let Laura introduce herself, and then I can kind of give an overview of what we've done thus far for the Office of Equity. And then Laura can talk about some of the data pieces that I think might be helpful for this commission. I think, and I'm about to start on a tangent, but data is really important. We have to know what we're tracking and what we're measuring to really know the story and where we're trying to go as an organization. So it's going to be really important.
Hey everyone, I think everyone knows me, but I am now in my new role as the Data Equity Project Manager. So happy to be participating in that capacity.
So what we have done so far, so one thing I want you guys to mark your calendars. April 18th will be the 1-year Equity Office update to Mayor and Council during the study session. And you guys can go in the previous archives and check out the July update. That was my first 100 days, and I gave an overview about what we were doing. So just some of those things from Mayor and Council. But so far, what we've been able to do since this office was established, we were given a budget. The position was given 4 FTEs. So my role, and then we have two project managers. Laura just talked about hers, which is being a data analyst, and then we also have an employee engagement project manager as well. The approach that we're taking is really starting to shift the culture for the city to start to really think about what does equity, diversity, and inclusion mean for the city of Tucson. For many folks, this is the first time that the city is having this conversation. And for some folks, this is not the first time that the city is having these conversations. There's been DEI and equity initiatives that has happened in the past with other departments, but not on this larger, more stabilized platform with the establishment of an equity office. So my role coming in has been to help put forth a roadmap and how are we going to do this work. So besides establishing a team, so Laura and her colleague, her counterpart joined the team back in September. So that was one of the first big pieces, was starting to put a team together and how do we start to deviate, what does this work look like? The other piece of that has been focused on looking at our budget. So that was one of the first few things that I capitalized on as soon as I got here. Again, I started it last March, but last summer, back in June, we did something called an equity budget analysis for the city. And we did a pilot. And what we did is we looked at supplementals that came through the city's budget process that was outside of the standardized budget, where folks asked for additional funding, and we had that go through an equity assessment. That was pretty successful, and successful in the sense that departments did it, they completed it, and we were able to kind of get an idea of how we were spending our money as an organization. So successful that this year, for the fiscal year, we decided to do it on the entire fiscal budget for each department. So we actually just got those completed equity budget analysis probably about a week ago. And now myself and my team has taken those to review with our CFO to figure out, okay, how do we start to share? How are we thinking about the way we spend our money, resource allocation as an organization, and what are some of those impacts on our underserved and marginalized communities? So I would say the budget piece is one of those big programmatic areas that we are focusing on as an organization, because that essentially runs our service delivery. The other piece is, I'm gonna save data for Laura to talk about, but the other one is talking about that culture container and that capacity building. So that's looking more internal facing, right? In order for us to think about how to better serve our constituents, we have to really understand what does that truly mean for us and what are our roles as city employees. So we've been starting something called Lunch and Learns. We do informal learn opportunities where people can come together over the lunch hour. We have various different topics. We've been doing these since October. I think in October, we started with Pride Month. We started talking about a pronouns campaign awareness, starting to normalize some of those conversations in the workplace. November, we started to talk about some of the inequities that we see. We've been doing some on housing, looking at the housing programs that we have here in Tucson. We've been looking at water equity. We've been looking at just various different topics. Right now, we are starting a book club to help also introduce other ways that folks can start to think about how do we start to think about diversity, equity, and inclusion on a professional level, but then also a personal level. So again, creating opportunities for that culture container building. So that's what we've been doing. We're also in the process of getting ready to release an RFP for some foundations of equity training. Training is important because, again, if you want people to change or shift systems and things like that, you have to make sure people have the right tools and resources to be set up for success to do that. And we're setting up forth for foundations of equity training, so that way all employees across the city can have this standardized knowledge and support to think about, what does equity mean for the city of Tucson? How does this pertain to my work? And what do we do going forward? The other thing I would share from an employee engagement perspective is we've started a program called Departmental Equity Coordinators. So essentially we have different ambassadors across the city from every department that's representative to really be equity champion within the department. This was a self-identified and self-application process. And we had about 70 applicants. We did about 67 interviews of those folks, and we ended up with about 30 people from across the city who are coming together on a monthly basis to, one, get more skills, tools, and resources to advance equity, but then also to bring their level of expertise and knowledge from their department to help us understand how do we better implement these practices and these goals that we're trying to do, making sure that it's working for your unique department, right? We know that departments all have their own circumstantial needs. So if we're talking about hiring and retention, that's going to look different in the city attorney's office than it will be in environmental general services, right? So how do we start to bridge that gap and bridge those relationships that we're looking for when it comes to our service delivery as an organization? I could talk all day, but I think the last thing I'll share before I give Laura a second to chat is, we are starting to move as we're coming up on this 1 year and looking at what we have heard from the city and what we have heard from department directors and some constituents. We have met with organizations informally as far as them reaching into the Office of Equity and, hey, we want you to come speak, we want to learn more about what you're doing. And then also other boards and commissions. We are starting to go in this framework of focusing on workforce. We know that that's a greater need, not just a need here in Tucson, all across the country, but we know that workforce retention is really important. How do we figure keeping our diversified workforce? So we do have a diverse workforce, could be more diverse, but getting those diverse applicants into the city, how do we retain them, right? So that's one area of focus that we're going to be looking at is the workforce. The other area is some long-range planning. So right now we are drafting up an equity action plan, which will be a model for how we move this work forward. And that equity action plan, we're already doing some of the work. So it focuses on capacity building, it focuses on procurement, it focuses on the workforce, it focuses on community public safety, and it also focuses on accessibility. So looking at our translation services, looking at ASL interpretation, making sure that are we providing, documentations that's translated? Are we allocating resources behind that as an organization to ensure that constituents can truly take advantage of the service delivery that we have as an organization? So those are kind of like super high level for a very complex document, but what you all can expect to see over the next few months is that, that will come out as we are working with the various departments and stakeholders. Housing initiatives and the unhoused sheltered populations will go under community safety, just making sure that how are we looking at that? And there's already a lot of other programmatic initiatives that's happening across the city that's addressing that. And then the other thing is we're in the subcommittee for the U of A's Racial Covenants Project, and we're using that to help us get a better understanding and a history of Tucson and how we have some of the historically segregated neighborhoods. While it's not super advertised that it's still that way, but as you can see, when you look at the districting lines and the wards and things like that, and the populations that make up those neighborhoods, they're still kind of reflective of some of that historical inequities that we've seen in the past. So that's a little bit about where we're at. Are there any questions for me about anything that I have said?
Go ahead, Vicki.
Hi, thanks. I actually a comment. You touched a little on accessibility, and I just wanted to point out, I know that, accessibility should fit into all three areas, DEI, but I think it sometimes gets lost. And, a lot of organizations now pull that out and it's, DEIA, or they make the acronym IDEA so that you start with it, inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility, so it doesn't get lost or access. And I'm sorry, I'm executive director of Direct Advocacy and Resource Center, which serves people who are aging and those with diverse disabilities. So that's my main focus. However, access is a lot broader than that. And I would really welcome a longer conversation on this, because I think the city is missing a lot in terms of access. It's been an ongoing issue for years, and you only mentioned a couple little components, and those are so small. there are
Mhm.
some big things, especially with all of the city's website and electronic documents
Mhm.
and formal email correspondence. Much of what's currently in place is not accessible or compliant with Section 508 or the ADA. And
Mm.
so I think that should be a bigger component. And I would really like an opportunity to talk more about that and what the plan is. I know it's been quite a few years where there was a federal audit of the city and they had to do a corrective action plan because their ADA plan wasn't on track. And I'm not sure where that is right now, but I don't think a lot has been done. And so there's a long way to go. And I just want to make sure that's not missed.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Vicky. And I apologize I didn't speak more to it, but Laura and I have been diving deeper into that. I've met with our Cody coalition here at the city, but also we are already also working on digital equity. So that's one of the other projects we've been working on, a partnership with Pima County for the website and translation and things like that. And also like internally for some of our city staff, we got like a new security method and how our computer systems and VPNs are verified. And one of the things that we pointed out earlier in the fall was that it wasn't accessible for some folks who needed that. And that was some of the small incremental changes we've been working with IT. So for us, and for me, it naturally is embedded into everything. And we have been trying to put it into some of those things, but I'm more than happy to continue the conversation with you and how do we look at that on a larger platform. I also am aware that the city is out of date in compliance with ADA, and that's another thing that we have been looking at. And also, we used to have ADA ambassadors for the organization, and I've been trying to figure out who are those people and how do we get them re-centralized so that we can start to move the conversations on what does this look like for the organization. So we have done a little bit of research and trying to pull folks back together to continue that conversation.
Well, again, I would appreciate a longer conversation, especially those ambassadors for the departments and how ADA training is being done. I was asked to review that and we gave a lot of feedback that wasn't accepted. And this was before you came on board. And there's also things that Cody's gotten involved slightly, but they have not been involved in some of the broader issues. Because it's only what's taken to them. And I'll give you another example is, like there's a new city website that is not compliant and it could have been prevented if the RFP had required the vendor to know how to do that. And I won't get into all of that, but now it's a new website and now there's like damage control already. And so that there's just a lot that the city is doing, kind of standard operating procedure, how they've always done it, and even putting out new proposals without those considerations. And then it just ends up costing more money and time and creating an access issue in the meantime.
Absolutely. I'm going to go ahead and drop my email in the chat. If you could just send me an email, let's get something on the calendar. But yes, I'm truly, like I said, we've kind of started these conversations already, and I'm more than happy to continue them with you. And you and I can work together to figure out how do we come up with a game plan to continue to move this forward. And Laura will be a good contact for the website because that's something that we've been bringing up and having those conversations as well with our IT department and our PIOs as well.
Okay, that'd be great. And I can put this in the email. I do know, I'm not sure who you're working with the county, but in the health department, they have a department of health equity, and they're doing a lot of this work too. And we're actually, my center and Arizona Center for Disability Law are doing some trainings for them, but also reviewing some of their policies regarding accessibility. So if you haven't connected with that office, I'd highly recommend them as a resource.
Okay, cool. And I have to go, but one thing that's popping off for me, Vicky, is like we basically need like a cross jurisdictional task force team, right? Because we do so much that's in collaboration and connected to one another, that making sure all these interagencies are talking to each other, especially about such a very important topic. And I'm not throwing anyone under the bus, but the city is potentially behind in these areas. Some other folks might be too. So how do we make sure that when we do get to this level of being standard and operating, that it's centralized across the border and we're not having all these different projects or plans? So I totally hear you and I'm seeing you. So I'm definitely looking forward to a future conversation with you. I have to go doing interviews for a position in my office. So the next one's at 1:30, but I'm super thankful to be here. Thank you, Allison. Thank you, Jay, for your time. I'm confident that Laura will continue to be able to answer any questions that you have, and she can share a little bit more about some data stuff that we're doing. And if there's anything, I dropped my email in the chat, so please feel free to send me an email. And yeah, thank you guys.
Thanks, Louise. We really appreciate you taking the time, and good luck with your interview.
Thank you.
Hey, so yeah, I can talk a little bit about some of the things that I've been working on. One of the main pieces of my job that's just sort of integral to what I'm doing is just being a resource to departments when they come up with new programs that they want to incorporate equity into from a data perspective. So some examples of that are meeting with the Prop 411 teams to think about how can we make sure that we're doing repavement in an equitable way. We're not just repaving the streets where the people are, have the loudest voices. So how can we use data to make sure that they're driving those decisions? Meeting with Storm to Shade to think about how they're incorporating equity and where they're, putting green stormwater infrastructure, which also enables trees, things like that. So just being that resource for anyone who needs to think about equity and data. Another thing that I've been working on is the racial equity survey that was conducted by the Government Alliance on Race and Equity in 2021. When I came on board last September, I was asked to sort of assess the results of what they produced and figure out how we can modify that survey to go forward and make this an annual effort that we use to track our progress as a city to see how our attitudes are changing, how our work, the Office of Equity, are we getting across, or do we need to change our strategies? And so that started out as a 65 question survey, really focused on race, as the GARE would imply. And so we want to narrow that down to be a much more manageable survey for employees, and to broaden the scope beyond race to incorporate all types of identities and experiences to just to make sure that we're capturing all aspects of equity and inequities in our workforce. So we have been working on that, and we're developing a methodology to analyze that, to also look at disaggregated data. So we're not just kind of looking at the city as a whole, but looking at the sort of intersectional identities. So not just how there are non-white Hispanics versus white, versus Black or African American, but maybe how are Black or African American men different from women, different from, Asian transgender people, like any of those different categories of identities, to see where there are some experiences that could get lost. And also developing ways to take that and, use that to propel focus groups. So if we do find that there is inequities and experiences, how can we drill down deeper into what we're finding? So yeah, and so that also, the findings of that will help guide the equity action plan. And I think that will become clear when those things come out and when the analysis of GARE comes out. which we'll also touch on in the mayor and council presentation. Other than that, a big part of what I'm doing is a equity data strategy. And I do have a little presentation on this that I'll go ahead and share. And I'll just run through this really quick. There's kind of a lot more than I, than I think you want to see. But there are 5 components of this. The first is a demographic collection policy. So what that means is establishing the standards on what kinds of demographics we will collect about the public when we do public surveying. Right now, a lot of staff just, every time you do a survey, you want to get feedback on your plan, you want to get feedback on, where you're going to put a playground. They sometimes incorporate demographics, they sometimes don't. And it's usually what they ask is up to the whatever staff person, whatever questions they ask, whatever answers they provide. And so coming up with a policy like this will not only help staff not reinvent the wheel every time they do a survey, but it also gives us a chance to, incorporate information for the public on how we're using this information, why we're collecting it, how we define different categories, things like that. And yeah, really, that's mostly that. And I would like to get your feedback on that at some point, to make sure that we are collecting information that is using the most inclusive language possible, and that we're getting information that we really need to make decisions. So if there's information that you would like to be incorporated into these kinds of surveys, we would be open to encouraging staff to collect that kind of information. An equity data hub. So that's going to be a kind of replacing the poverty and urban stress. So this will be taking census data and pre-packaging it into all of our geographies, our neighborhoods, our wards, our city boundaries. So it's as easy as possible for staff and the public to get the most updated information that they can on any of the demographics that we frequently use. And so that will be an automated process. Third is developing a social equity composite index. And, I'm sure you're all very familiar with using these kinds of equity indices. And right now the city uses a lot of different ones. Housing uses the neighborhood vulnerability index. There's also one that the transportation department uses, our climate teams use a different one. And so we'd like to come to some kind of consensus on what we're using so that it's clear to the city and the public what we mean when we talk about vulnerable communities, who those people are and how we're defining that. So that, when we ask staff to focus on those communities, they have a clear idea of what that means. And also so that the public can understand, how this affects them. A census infographic tool that will just be a sort of, drag, point and click, that's not drag and drop, point and click tool that will help a lot of people who are not data people, get really quick information on just, what are the demographics within 1 mile of this location that I'm interested in, and just get some nice infographics or some data from that. And then finally, developing a demographic data toolkit. And so this is really trying to improve the data literacy in the city of Tucson, so that people know how to collect data. So how do you do a survey? What happens to that data once it's there? How can I analyze it? How can I visualize it? How can I track it year over year to see any progress? And then also developing some toolkits that are sort of script based that would be somewhat easy for some, technically literate people to sort of quickly analyze data from an equity lens. And, for the people who are not comfortable using that, then someone like myself or someone in IT could assist and use this tool to help those people. Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff there, but I will go ahead and stop sharing and take any questions. Oh, I also want to mention that we will be doing a public engagement component to this. So getting feedback from the community on the questions that we'll be asking, on this sort of demographic collection policy, on what goes into an equity indicator, how do we define vulnerability or inequity, so that they have a chance to define what that means to them, and it's not just us telling them what that means. And also I want to mention Vlad Berg from IT is here, and he is invited because he's sort of working on this gentrification piece to this. So thinking about if we, if we create this equity index and it kind of defines how the city of Tucson, what communities we're focusing on, that can potentially have a negative impact where we're really investing in this area, and then, people might be displaced. So he's trying to kind of work on how can we, assess that and try to get ahead of that, or at least be aware of it happening if it is.
Great, thanks so much, Laura. That's super helpful. And with that, I will ask if any of the subcommittee members have any thoughts, questions, comments that they would like to share. I will jump in if anybody has any questions along the way. Anything occurs to you, just jump in. But there are a couple of things that I wanted to highlight. I'm really happy to see that you guys are looking at really how to measure equity. It seems like that's kind of the point that y'all are at. And, I think one of the things particularly that this subcommittee has been wrestling with and really asking the full commission to take up, and then to make recommendations to mayor and council and HCD and others is, it's really hard to do this work if you don't have a starting point to understand where are we regarding equity now and how are we measuring it over time. So I think that component about measuring equity is critical, because it's hard to measure the impact of policies if you don't know where you're starting, and then what things look like 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 20 years down the line. So I think that that's critical. Particularly, I think, the fact that there is a desegregation subcommittee for the full commission is important as well. Obviously, there's still racial, ethnic, and economic segregation in this community. And I believe that though we talk about it and I think recognize it to a certain extent, there's really not a very clear understanding of how policies are improving those areas. And I think, like you mentioned, not only improving, but potentially doing further damage, and how we can avoid that. So I'm excited about that. The other thing that really occurs to me is that we need to do a lot of connecting the dots, because this is something that these ideas are things that we as a subcommittee have talked a lot about. We've talked about it on the commission. We brought it up with, HCD and others, and there just doesn't seem to be a lot of connection about what's going on. And I understand that a lot of this is in the early stages, but I really feel like connecting the dots about who is doing this work. I know that there was the Prosperity Initiative that Pima County is leading, but that other jurisdictions are a part of, is another, main area where equity is being examined and really dug into pretty deeply, and how that affects policy. So, that's just another example where there seems to be this equity piece bubbling up in a pretty major way. So I think really connecting those dots is critically important. And then, I think the last thing I'll just say is, a lot of what it sounds like y'all are doing is internal work within the city, which, makes sense to me to a certain extent. And I would encourage y'all to really look also at the commissions in general. I mean, our commission in particular, since this is the one that we're on, but, how are commissions equitable? Are the membership of commissions equitable? Is it, I feel like, obviously if commissions are not equitable, we're not hearing the voices of everybody in the community. And then finally, I think, as far as like our commission goes, I'd really love to see how, we can support the work that y'all are doing and how we can collaborate together. Because I do really think also, as y'all are working on equity all the time, and really defining it, getting the message out to the commissions, like you're getting the message out to the various departments. I think it would be worthy to have a training for the full Commission on Equitable Housing and Development about equity, though we are formed specifically to look at equity in housing. I do still think it's an area where there's some confusion and lack of understanding, just kind of cohesion of thought about what equity even is and what it means to, look at equity and improve equity across the community. It's a hard topic. And when you really, are working to operationalize it, it's even more challenging. So, as y'all move forward, I think really, helping to get that framework out there, like to the commissions and others, so that, we're all kind of using a similar framework to think about equity and how we're improving equity in the community. So those are just a couple of the things that I wrote down and would love to see and have been thinking about. So again, I'll ask if there are any other thoughts, questions, or comments from subcommittee members.
Well, I'm just going to jump on to what you said, Jay, and Laura should already know this, that if there's any training, education, documentation, manual, and guinea pig issues, you need the guinea pig. You know where to find me.
Awesome. Always need a guinea pig.
Thanks, Mike. Joe, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
I wanted to echo Jay's sentiments that looking at how we pick people that influence our city government on commissions and whatnot is a worthwhile effort. The other thing I want to express is a concern that we study a lot of these things, and we make maps of demographics, and we make maps of where we've got segregation in neighborhoods. We study where we've got displacement. We get Gary Pavo to do a study on displacement, gentrification, and what's going on. And we're going to have poverty and stress. Well, we're going to strap that. Now we're going to do something different. That we keep a cycle going of, we're going to study this and we're going to have some findings, and then we ain't going to do nothing about it. So my concern is that the good work and hard work that you're doing, Laura, and that Larice is doing that work in the community doesn't get acted upon, and that the city doesn't show the worth to that work that you're doing by taking action on it. That's my biggest concern about the whole enterprise. Thank you.
Right. Okay, so I can respond to a lot of this, and I also took notes on things that I don't have a response to, but I think are great things to bring up. Vicky, do you want to add something before I respond?
Yeah, well, I just think what Joe said is really important, and I feel the same way. And I was almost visualizing, I'd almost like to see a logic model, because I feel like what we've been presented with is only part of a logic model, and it's kind of like resources and outputs, but then there aren't the outcomes, like what are going to be the outcomes? Like there's this huge investment of, resources and outputs or tasks, but then what? What are the anticipated outcomes from this investment? And I think that the point Joe made is really important. This happens a lot with I don't know, all the planning documents that I see there's lots of very broad plans, but nothing is connected to, really tangible outcomes that anybody's working toward. Everything is very global.
Right. Okay. So, and I have, I totally understand what you're saying. So, the reason I'm kind of looking off on the side is because we do have an equity action plan that's in progress, and that was something Larice mentioned as our long range planning. And that really is, I think, the comprehensive plan that you're looking for. It is like a let's see, 5-part framework that covers employee capacity building, public engagement, workforce development, procurement practices, accessibility, and public safety as our sort of core areas that we're looking to improve. And I wish I could share more of that because I think it really would help you, but it's still in progress being reviewed with other departments. But one of the things on that in the public engagement section is looking at boards and commissions. And so the Office of Equity is establishing a commission. And also to something that Jay mentioned, we are, I just keep looking off over at it. We are planning to develop a training for commission members, like exactly what you're talking about, so that we're all on the same page, talking about, what does equity mean? What are we really working for, so that we know the definitions that we're using. Something that I'm not sure that's incorporated right now is thinking about how people are chosen to be on commissions. And so I did write that down as something that when we get to that piece, to make sure that that's factored in. Because I do think that that's important. Also, you mentioned public engagement. We are the person that Larice is hiring right now is supposed to have a public engagement component. It's a management coordinator, but we also might be hiring a specific public engagement project manager. So that will be someone that hopefully can really be out on the ground, talking to people and also developing a public engagement plan, kind of like I'm developing this data plan that would, try to create toolkits for how do you engage, different communities. Like what are the city's standards so that we make sure that when teams and departments and programs go out there, are they doing everything that they can to hear every voice, and are they doing it in a way that is culturally competent and inclusive? And then, so just going through all my notes, the idea of studying but never acting on anything. I do really think that our team has every intention to do as much action as we can. We, in a lot of ways, like you said, we are internal focused. And in that way, I do think we have a lot of capacity to make change internally because we really, are in a position to push departments and teams and people. But it also comes down to we're really advisors to the departments. And so, Prop 411, for example, I really plan to try to help them think about making their decisions using data to make sure that their choices are equitable. But at the end of the day, what gets done is their decision. And so that's just something to keep in mind that, we can do the best that we can. It does require that larger organizational effort. I think that's everything.
Great, thanks, Laura. I appreciate you taking good notes and responding to the things that we've raised. And I think another piece of the puzzle for me, like people are talking about, is the constant studying and lack of action or perceived lack of action. And, it's like turning a ship around, it's like we're just so used to slowly going the same way all the time. It's hard for I think even like myself, who kind of works in this equity space, to imagine what it's like to turn the ship around. So, you know, it's a lot of hard work, but I do think also, you know, creating that framework and then having also the narrative to explain to the community, we are looking at equity, and these are how things that we're doing, these programs, policies, et cetera, are improving equity. It is just really critical. And that to me just goes back to the measurement piece over time, so that we can tell that story. So anyway, I think we could probably keep talking about this all day. I will just check in one more time with the subcommittee members to see if anybody has any final thoughts and comments for the city team before we move on with the rest of our agenda. All right, I think we are good, Laura and company. We really appreciate you all again coming by and chatting. And you know, I guess maybe the last thing I will leave with is, you know, one of the reasons that we wanted to have y'all come is just so we could make the connection and be able to collaborate with y'all and support you in the work that y'all are doing, and you know, just hope that we can continue communicating with some regularity as we move forward.
Yeah, we're really glad that you reached out and got this going. We're happy to keep participating and attending these meetings to figure out what those points are.
Cool, great, thank you so much.
Yep. I guess I'll go ahead and jump off now.
Sounds good.
Bye.
All right, you guys. We skipped up to number 3. I'm going to move on to number 2, ASU Housing Equity Study. I don't know that there's a whole lot here, but it is on our agenda. I'm not sure if the full, I was not at the full commission meeting, but I don't know if there was much done about this or discussed about this. Anything that we need to talk about here? Anything relative to the last full commission meeting here? Am I making sense? I felt like that didn't make sense. Maybe it did.
So, I mean, Jay, I kept this on here. I think there was a little bit of confusion and some strange conversation at the full commission meeting. So I think I left it on here because I thought maybe it would be helpful to kind of regroup from the full commission meeting and kind of think about how to bring it back up with them. And Vicky and I think Lori, we were having technical difficulties with. And so it was sort of Vicky and Mike trying to hold the line. And so if Vicky or Mike, you want to talk a little bit about that conversation.
I'm sorry I missed a strange conversation.
Yeah. Well, I think what happened, what Lori was going to present, and then you couldn't be there or had to get off because you had difficulties or an emergency.
I couldn't get back in the meeting.
Oh.
I got kicked off and then the Zoom link was not working, but my Zoom was fine with everything else. So I don't know what happened, but I tried and Allison was trying to help me while she was presenting. I tried 10 times to get back in. It just didn't work. So I apologize for that because it was right before I was supposed to present Jay's note.
Well, and so then it left it for Michael and me, and of course I wasn't prepared to present. Anyway, we got it, and we were able to pull up the statement and share it. But I think and please, Allison and Michael, help me if I get this wrong, and I'm sorry. Hopefully my voice lasts. I've been sick. I just got my voice back yesterday. One of the I should have it in front of me, but the recommendation, I think the way it read was to go to mayor and council, and we had to explain that. I think the way it was written just didn't represent what we really talked about in the committee, because what we talked about, I believe, was kind of not like going to a formal city council meeting, but going in and meeting with members in the districts. And somebody had raised that there was a concern. They felt like the subcommittee should not be going to mayor and council and presenting like a position, you know, without it going through the full commission. And so we tried to clarify that that wasn't the intent at all. It, you know, was more of, that's why we were bringing it forward, that it was an idea and the intent wasn't to do anything without the full council, nor to go like as, you know, to a formal meeting. It was to do those more informal information gathering and educational sessions. So I think that was a big piece of it. Is that right, Allison and Michael? I feel like that was like the main thing that kept coming up at, multiple times, and it's like, no, that's not what we meant. But please add anything else that I don't remember.
No, I think, yeah, there was some interpretation that all of a sudden this subcommittee was going to go around to mayor and council and talk to things that they hadn't talked to the full commission about.
That's hilarious. It's our recommendation for the full commission. So it's like bringing it to the full commission to then deliberate on it. It was a full commission. So, well, so where did it end up? Did it get tabled? Were we gonna clarify things, or what was the outcome?
I think it was just a report, right, Allison? So there was no vote.
Yeah, I don't think there was action taken. So it sounds like there might be worth having another conversation at the next subcommittee update.
Yeah, so and maybe what it is like, if we want permission then to do those meetings, we maybe need to provide a little bit more information about the context and content and context of those.
Yeah, okay. So maybe we'll revisit it when we do our present out for our subcommittee to the full commission next time. That's helpful. Also, well, actually, this will be another agenda item for today. Anything else? It seems to cover that issue for me. Is there anything else for this issue that we need to cover here today, aside from we'll just report out about this at the next full commission meeting and get the conversation going again? Is that pretty much it? Okay. Number 4 is the Prosperity Initiative, and I asked to have this on the agenda partly because I wanted just to know how that presentation went and what you guys's kind of reaction and feedback was about that. And it was Bonnie, I think Bonnie presented, right? Bonnie Bazada.
I'm sorry, Jay, what's your question?
Just how did that presentation go? How did it strike you? What were your thoughts in response to the presentation that they gave about the Prosperity Initiative that Bonnie gave? I think it was Bonnie.
So to just jog folks' memory, right? That's the so Bonnie Bazada and Nicole Fife attended the last meeting, and the two, kind of presented two policies that are kind of moving forward to mayor and council on April 4th. And right, one is early childhood education. So we talked less about that one. The second was the kind of housing mobility was maybe the short term, the shorter term for what we were talking about, but essentially that was right. So Keith Bentiel from the University of Arizona presented research that he's done around kind of generational outcomes that have been shown around housing mobility programs. So opportunities to provide to help kind of folks from in a higher poverty neighborhood move to a lower poverty neighborhood, and what that has been shown in terms of preventing or challenging generational poverty. I'm struggling with words today. I apologize, but so is that policy, and then also kind of getting feedback from the commission around, right, there's from talking about that policy and from talking about just broadly policies that the Prosperity Initiative wants to look at. What are other, especially housing related policies that we want them to kind of go back and research? And so, right, one additional piece was right, if you're talking about moving to higher opportunity areas, how are we making sure that we're investing in kind of traditionally disinvested neighborhoods? And so, what's the policy there around housing stability or anti-displacement or gentrification? I think the others that I know they want to talk about are home ownership. I think we've talked about evictions and tenant protections as another that at least I keep pushing thanks to this subcommittee. But yeah, so that was that conversation, if that helps jog the memory. And I don't know, Jay, I think there was generally like I'll let Vicky go. Go, Vicky.
Yeah, go ahead, Vicky. You don't need to raise your hand. You can just.
Oh, no, go ahead, finish what you were gonna say, Allison. No. Well, for me, I felt like there was a lot of information presented. I mean, a couple takeaways for me. I'm still a little confused by it, honestly. And maybe I just don't have enough information. My only concern was kind of getting back to who participates in these groups and really having people with lived experience as part of these efforts. And maybe I just missed it. There might be more, but I know like in the PowerPoint, they talked about getting feedback from 29 adults, which seems like a very small number to me. And then the group that's meeting, and maybe there's another group, but like they seem to be all professionals, like,
Yeah, it's I think people that are working for the cities in the region, basically.
Yeah. So I guess that was my biggest question, just about where is the participation from people with lived experience? And I just feel like that should be they should be heavily involved in guiding it.
Yeah. Anybody else have any thoughts or reflections about it?
But sorry, just one thing, Joe, but otherwise a lot of the content looks like great ideas and good stuff.
Yeah. Good, yeah.
I think my one piece of feedback, and I think it's just a phrasing and language thing, was reading the memorandum to the CEHD about it. Was one of you talked about the two things, and one was increasing access to affordable, high quality early childhood care and education. The other one is phrased as affordable housing to reduce geographic concentrations of poverty. And I always, the way that's phrased, I don't think it's intentionally like this, but it sets off a red flag to me, because it always sounds like the purpose is, well, we're not going to reduce the poverty, but we do want to spread it out so you can't see it just as easily, And I don't know that that's the intent of anybody who was writing that. When I look at it linguistically, that kind of thing, sets off a red flag. We do want, of course, affordable housing in areas of opportunity, because we know that's where there is less affordable housing, and that's how we, get people in areas of opportunity. And we want to bring opportunity to areas that don't have it. And I think that's well iterated in other places. In that one place, it just strikes me as phrased oddly. Thank you.
Well, this is Vicky. I'd just like to add, though, I don't know, Joe, if it wasn't intentional. I sort of had that takeaway from the presentation that is what they were talking about to an extent. So, and I don't recall, but maybe you or somebody asked a question about it. I know there was some discussion about that perspective, I thought. So
No, my question was about when they talk about home ownership opportunities. I always want to know, are you trying to do individual one person, hey, home ownership, or are we talking about bringing things like co-ops and helping community land trusts invest in these areas where we can have community controlled housing instead of trying to fix this one parcel at a time by one person owning a home and helping with down payment? Like, again, like I feel the same way about LIHTC. Like, it's transformative for the people who can get into a LIHTC. Down payment assistance is transformative for somebody that it helps with the down payment to a home. I worry about the scalability of those kind of targeted individual initiatives versus community-based initiatives, no matter the size of that community, whether it's a co-op, whether it's a community land trust, whether it's something more public. That was my question for it.
Yeah, I think that the question that you guys are raising about building affordable housing in high opportunity areas is a way to, kind of spread poverty out so that it kind of, you can't see it anymore. I had a chance to talk to Bonnie about this before the meeting, and she said that other people had raised that concern as well. And I understand that, but one of the things that, like, in the kind of housing equity space that gets trumpeted a lot is that one of the best ways to break generational poverty is to get children out of high poverty neighborhoods into high opportunity neighborhoods. That is one of the things that has had the biggest impact on breaking the cycle of generational poverty. And I think what I mentioned to Bonnie is that, and she was like, this isn't, it's not either or. I think when you're looking at, affirmatively furthering fair housing and addressing housing segregation, it's a both and. You've got to build affordable housing in high opportunity areas. You've got to break down the barriers for people to be able to live in those areas. But at the same time, you've also got to be working to improve high poverty areas that don't have any opportunity. It's a both and that didn't come out, I think, to your point, in the language, Joe, but Bonnie was like, I'm horrified that that's the way it's being interpreted, because that's not the point, but that's clearly the way it's coming across.
Yeah, that was my thought, that probably isn't. Oh, gosh, I don't ever want to ascribe malice where it can just be somebody, kind of glossed over a language thing. Yeah, of course, moving a family that's in poverty into an area of opportunity is going to be very helpful and very effective for that family. It's tougher to make an area without opportunity into an area of opportunity, which is why we keep going for individual solutions, and why we say, oh, it's really effective to do this thing for that family. It's just a really kind of targeted, kind of individualistic, very compartmentalized thing that I think we see a lot of with not just government solutions, but public-private partnership kind of solutions and those kind of things. And I hope that, one of the things I always want to push for is the community-based solution, where we help a community of people instead of trying to pick out, well, we can help this one. Okay, well, you've invested money in that one, and that means that on finite budgets, there isn't money to do the things that could be maybe a broader piece of help for the community. That's all. That's where I'm at.
Did Jim or anybody by chance read the statement that I provided about this during the meeting? Because I actually went out of my way to write it. Did somebody read that?
I asked Bonnie to read it. Yes. She read
Okay.
it.
So I think that, the points that y'all are making are well taken, but I guess I want to come down on the side of, I think that this is actually potentially a transformative thing, because I feel like it's actually creating a framework to put all policy in the perspective of equity. And the other thing that I think is critical about this, where as a commission for the city of Tucson, where we are very challenged, is you can't do any of this stuff if it's not regional. I mean, it's like to be talking about addressing poverty in the city of Tucson without talking about Marana, Oro Valley, Sarita. It's disingenuous almost, because part of the reason that we have these pockets of poverty is all of these policies that allowed essentially wealthy white folks to move to Marana and Oro Valley over the past, 50, 60, 70 years. And if we act like that's not part of what's going on here, and don't talk about the role that those communities play, like, it will never solve this issue. So I think the fact that there is all of these cities and jurisdictions, at least at the table, is important. And I get the part about not having community voices there, but just the fact that there's some regional conversation about equity, I think is really important. So I also, the thing that frustrates me somewhat about this is like, same with the Office of Equity that we just talked to. It's kind of like, we're the commission with the city that has got equity explicitly in its name. And I just don't feel like it seems like we're more of an afterthought, or people are like, oh, let us tell you about what we've been doing. We hope you like it, as opposed to really having us be part of the conversation. It's more like they're just running it by us because somebody said, oh, you should probably talk to this group. So I just, that part is a little bit frustrating to me, that we're not kind of more involved in some of this stuff, since that's what we're supposed to be doing. But anyway, overall, I just thought it was a great idea overall. And I was interested to hear y'all's feedback. Anything else about that before we move on? I mean, I guess actually I would wonder, maybe my real question is, considering this is something that's really looking at policy and the effect of policy on people through an equity lens, is there something that we can do as a commission to support this or stay engaged? I guess I don't want it to like fade away. It's like they came and talked to us, and then 2 years later, it'll be like, oh, here's all the stuff that we've done. Just wanted to drop by again and tell you what's happening. So I would like to stay engaged with it. And I don't know if there's a way, what you guys think about that, if there's maybe a request that we could have to stay more engaged.
Jay, are you talking about just with the equity office at the city, or the initiative that Bonnie's doing? Because I mean, my thought was, I get that they're busy people, but they could attend our subcommittee meeting.
Right.
On a regular basis, you just have a good way of putting things into words, and I don't want to be the negative Nelly, but my thought was the exact thing you said, which was, here I came, I gave you an update, and now I'm going. And that's not helpful at all. And I'm really happy that they're doing that work, and it was good to hear about it. But again, why do I keep attending meetings and subcommittees if the work that we're doing is kind of parallel to the work that other initiatives are doing?
Yeah. And I don't really know, I guess that is my question. I don't know exactly how to remedy that, aside from maybe we, put together a letter or an email or something to both of the Prosperity Initiative and the Equity Office to say, we expect you to stay engaged with us, because that's what our role is as a commission. I mean, obviously we can use nice language, but I mean, I think that's kind of what we're saying, right?
I mean, I think an invitation, a letter with an invitation that, you know, we just aren't sure how we're going to further our work unless, you know, we have you all engaged with us and, you know, we have dialogue. And I mean, of course, we wouldn't say this in the letter, but instead of just presentations, you know,
Yeah.
we want dialogue, we want shared, you know, shared work, shared goals. Yeah, I would be all for that.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Allison.
I just, so I mean, the conversation with the equity office, my understanding is that they are willing to come fairly regularly. So I think I just forwarded the same invite that you guys all have. Not the one for the 27th of the month that seems to just be a rogue calendar invite, the real one. So yeah, I think they're totally open and willing to come, whether it's Laura or Larice or both of them. I think, and then the Prosperity Initiative, I don't see why they also wouldn't be interested in attending this commission. It is a little, so what's hard there is it's a little bit fast and furious in terms of they're really trying to pull together. So right, there's the 2 policies that are going to Mayor and Council on April 4th. And I don't know how this timeline is going to work, but they're trying to get the other policies wrapped up by June. And so just right, the understanding that there's like 2 more commission meetings. I'm happy to forward the calendar invite to Bonnie and Nicole, and I'm sure one of them would come. I kind of have no doubt about that, but also just recognize like sort of the timing can be hard too.
And maybe really what, instead of with the Prosperity Initiative, what the ask is, or I don't know how to put it exactly, but that we're basically saying, you know, we support your work and that we want to, you know, recommend to Mayor and Council as well, or, you know, have some sort of statement about it that, you know, we support it as the commission, we've talked to them and something like that. So, but staying engaged in some way so that we're having some impact and kind of stacking on that. Go ahead, Joe, I see you off mute.
Oh, no, I was just gonna say, I like the idea of them popping in and quarterly, giving us a little update, having a little discussion and hopefully making time for that. I think we've got the time in the meetings, like affordable housing went for 55 minutes yesterday. I think like the time's here.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's a good point. So I'm hearing 2 things. One is we want to make sure that we're communicating to the equity office that we would love for them to come to our meetings few 3, 4, 5 times a year for conversation updates. And then with the Prosperity Initiative, because it's a little bit different format, obviously they're not going to be meeting with us regularly because their work is you know, under a time crunch, but that we do want to make sure that kind of on the tail end that we're there to support and to kind of talk about why it's important from a housing equity standpoint, the overall framework that they're working on. Does that seem kind of where we're going with this? Cool. Anything else about the Prosperity Initiative discussion, which is item number 4 on our agenda before we move on? Okay, item number 5. Again, I think this is just kind of a holding place here, but it's discussion of issues related to gentrification and displacement. Item A, ideas for action, and B, gentrification indices. I don't remember that we had anything specific for that at this meeting. Go ahead, Joe.
If there isn't anything specific, I'd kind of like to ask a question, and I'm not sure if anybody here is really a specialist in this area, but the Mayor and Council discussed some zoning changes and approved a package this week. And one of my concerns is, I wasn't able to get to all the discussion about it, and I was really unclear about one particular element. One of the big things in it, this is regarding displacement, and this is why I'm bringing it up here. was that it wanted to really make clear that it seemed like townhomes were a medium density residential form, and that they fit in our zoning code in R2 and R3 zones, which I think is a correct and a good clarification. But also included, it looked to me like was a definition that that medium residential form would be okay in an MH1 and MH2 zone, which I think are the mobile home zones, if that's correct. So I know nobody here is in PDSD, but my question was, if we're defining MH1 and MH2 as zones where medium density residential is okay and not just mobile homes, that's okay for townhomes. I imagine there's a difference in profitability between townhomes and mobile home parks. Are we going to see if it's allowed? My concern would be that we define MH1 and MH2 as okay for townhomes, and then people who own mobile home parks say, you know, it's more profitable for me to kick everybody else, sell this to a developer, or redevelop it as townhomes, and this causes displacement of everybody in mobile home parks in Tucson and serves as a de facto mobile home ban in the city. That's my concern, and if I misread that, I want to know.
I certainly don't have an answer, but I was following at least a little bit the need to change the zoning code to allow what should obviously allow townhomes, but I don't know about the mobile home piece. Allison, do you know anything about that?
Unfortunately not. I mean, I don't know kind of the answer in terms of profitability around townhomes versus mobile homes, and yeah.
I know private equity firms have certainly found mobile home parks to be very profitable because they've been buying them up lately, but I don't know if townhomes are more or less profitable or what. So I guess, Joe, we don't have an answer for you.
Okay. Well, it's a displacement concern that I've had, and in Barrio Neighborhood Coalition, we have a couple discussions about what this would mean and whether, you know, I'm perpetually concerned about, you know, citywide kind of zoning changes, and you know, we're real sensitive about those kind of things. Some people think the parking changes are fine. I'm really concerned about citywide parking changes because I think a lot of context is needed, you know, which is why IPPs in theory seem like a good solution. But then, you know, are those rubber stamps or not? I'm trying to think if there was anything else in that package this week that really concerned me. Some people were just like, our hair is on fire about this, and I don't know what to do about it. I didn't get a chance to watch the meeting this week yet, so that's on my thing for this weekend to see kind of what happened and how that discussion went. But I was curious if anybody here know about it, and since no, that's okay. I just wanted to bring that up. It's the kind of thing that in all these initiatives we see, mayor and council need to recommend that PDSD look at zoning changes. And I just want to make sure that when PDSD looks at zoning changes, they're looking at more than what kind of capital investment we can get, that displacement and gentrification and affordability are things that are looked at there, and not affordability as in we trust that by deregulation, we're going to create more market rate that'll bring that the affordability will trickle down. I'm talking about specific, you know, actual affordability that happens in the real world. So those are my concerns perpetually about when we say PDSD should be making some changes. Are they changes that are sensitive to the residents of our city and to displacement?
Well, and it just goes back to the fact that still the vast majority of decisions that are made throughout the city, county, whatever, are just not made through an equity lens because nobody really seems to be thinking about that piece. So maybe, hopefully, Joe, next time we meet, you will be here and we will have a better answer and can maybe put it on the table for discussion again.
Yeah, maybe. And I'm not sure if there's somebody in PDSD I should talk to, or like if Mark Kerr over at the university, I know he deals with a lot of mobile home research and stuff, but yeah, I don't know.
I mean, I'm happy to kind of ask around and come back at the next meeting.
Well, even if you know who
you-
knows it, like I'm happy to reach out to somebody who can tell me, like, and I don't want to, like, I don't want to just like bug Corin for like every question I have. But if there's somebody who can answer the question, like I am happy to bug somebody.
All right. So I think we'll move on from agenda item number 5, if y'all are okay with that, and move to item number 6, which is the HAST implementation updates and discussion. Allison, what do you got for us?
So I think this happened since we last met, right? That or maybe this had already happened. Time is, I don't know. So source of income protection update is that we now can protect source of income as a in the housing market, right? So we got a new decision from the new Attorney General that the city of Tucson has the ability to include source of income protection in our in our fair housing ordinance and enforce that as a form of discrimination. So that is our so for the policy wonks, our direction from our city attorney is that is currently enforceable. We don't actually have to go back to mayor and council to get them to reinstate it or anything, which is fun. It's good. It is a good thing. We are starting to tell landlords, like all of, our understanding is that the kind of landlord associations understand that it is now in effect and enforceable. Just to be real, right? We have work to do on our end, on the city's end, in terms of providing educational materials and making information really clear on our website, and working with folks like the Southwest Fair Housing Council on enforcement and those education pieces. So we do have some work to kind of work with our partners and make sure we're all on the same page. And so working to move forward on that front, but in the meantime, it's enforceable. We're signing up landlords. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great news.
Yay. I think that's all I have on HAST at the moment. Actually, we just mayor and council at the last meeting on Tuesday, it was a consent agenda item. They adopted a update to HAST. The biggest piece was kind of updating our revitalization area maps to make sure that it included the 29th Street Thrive area in that map. There are a couple other pieces, but I'm happy to share that memo and that update. But it was pretty minor, but just wanted to mention that.
Great. Thanks, Allison. Moving on to number 7, call to the audience. This is a time when any member of the public may address the Commission on Equitable Housing and Development, Housing Desegregation Subcommittee. Due to time constraints, the time allocated for this is going to be 5 minutes. Individuals are allowed 3 minutes each. Due to open meeting law, Commission members cannot discuss topics that are not on the agenda. Items brought up by the public may be considered as an agenda item for a future meeting. Would anybody in the audience like to say anything? Okay, seeing nobody from the audience. Oh, Jim Hanley, you have the floor.
Hi, Jay. Thanks very much for giving me a minute to introduce myself. I'm a long-term resident, being born here in 1952. I've been active in community input to the city. I served on the Independent Audit and Performance Commission for 4.5 years. I was on this SCAB board, the Sign Code Advisory and Appeals Board, for about 4 years. Also served on boards at the university for quite a long time, different boards, including the Africana Studies Community Advisory Board. So I was very happy to see that there is this subcommittee, and I was informed of it by looking at the 29th Street Thrive project. I currently am president of a public benefit corporation that we formed to try to leverage my experience as a private wealth manager and my community engagement and my interest in helping in poverty alleviation to find ways to bring broader market capital investment into impoverished areas. Currently, we are working in the city of Buffalo to do high-tech, low-cost housing in that city where there are thousands of vacant or dilapidated and condemned homes in the inner city. So it's very interesting to me to hear your subcommittee, and I was actually looking for the next meeting of the HCD group, but yours has been a very stimulating meeting today, and I was especially glad to hear about the equity department or the equity agency within the city. And that's very, very encouraging to see. And in general, since we've been looking at recent city initiatives, this focus on poverty alleviation is very, very exciting to us. And we just want to find how we can help. We think that, especially with new high-tech, low-cost housing methods that we are, poised to bring into Buffalo, that we can make a contribution to what is probably the biggest need in poverty alleviation is low-cost housing availability. So thanks very much for giving me a minute to introduce myself and to commend the work that you're doing.
Thanks so much, Jim. We really appreciate you attending the meeting today, and thank you so much for your comments. Anybody else from the audience that would like to speak? All right, hearing none, I will move on to item number 8, next steps. Our next meeting will be April 27th at 1 o'clock. Are there any items that you guys want to talk about right now for future meetings? Remember, obviously, we can always, the email will go out so we can put things on the agenda at a later time. But is there any discussion about items for future meetings?
Jay, just a reminder, I guess, just to follow up on what Joe raised today about the zoning. I'd like to circle back to that and hope we can get an answer. Because it sounds like there might be some I'm losing my words today too, but unpleasant consequences. And
yeah,
so
cool. Yeah, we will definitely put that on our future agenda. What do you got, Joe?
No, I'll keep looking into that too. I'm gonna watch the meeting from Tuesday, Mayor and Council, to see if that is discussed at all or mentioned. And if not, again, if there's somebody I can talk to, that's great. The only thing I wanted to clarify, the next CHD total committee meeting is April 6th at 4 p.m. Is that correct?
That's what I have on my calendar.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to clarify that just in case there's anybody listening who might want to be
Yeah. All right. Thank you, everyone. If there are no items for future meetings, I will move to item number 9, which is adjournment. Thanks, everybody, for another great meeting, and look forward to seeing you all on April 6th at our full commission meeting. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thanks, everybody.
there.